Hey everyone, this is Kevin from thetestwebsite.com, and today we're going to be continuing our study on the endgame. We're going to be looking at when you should play for a draw. So many times if you were to study a GM game, anytime they go down any significant amount of material, 1, 2, or even a whole point in chess, they just give up on the spot. But really, if you're not a GM, I highly recommend you don't just give up. I highly recommend that you instead play for a draw. And so we're going to look at a few instances that you should keep in the back of your head where you should be thinking about playing for the draw, even if you have a losing game. So in this case, if you look at right here and it's black's move, if black tries to move like queen to d2, trying to eye down on this g2 square, trying to checkmate the king, as you can see, black has a decisive advantage up an entire piece, this rook here on a2. But what black has missed, and what a lot of players miss, is a perpetual check that white can do. Perpetual check meaning that white can continue to check and check the king, and there's nothing that black can do to improve the game. And most players from that position just agree upon a draw because the game's going to go on forever just checking and checking. So from here, black has missed the move queen to c8. He can't bring his queen back to d8 because then white can just take on d8 and now black's going to lose. Black doesn't want to lose this game, so he's going to have to move his king. From here, the queen can come down to f5, and either the king can go back if he moves his king back to g8 or h8, doesn't matter. Our queen can now come back to c8. If instead he moves his king to h7 and we move our queen back to f5, let's say he tries to move his pawn to g6. Now we can capture this pawn on f7, and then the king and the queen are just going to continue to go back and forth. And this is perpetual check. If you perpetual check in the rule books, it's not a draw, but most players after perpetual check will just agree on a draw, and that's usually what happens. But as you can see here, white's down a lot in material, but at the same time black left him an opportunity to have perpetual check. And especially this happens if you have a queen. Anytime you have a queen, I like to look for perpetual check. So many players, if they go down in material, they try to just throw the entire kitchen sink at your opponent, sacrificing pieces off the wall, trying for an extravagant attack, when instead, a lot of times if you go down and you know you don't have a good chance to win, I try to set up a perpetual check. I try to use the pieces that I have to try to expose the king so that I can perpetual check and get a draw out of the game. And I think this is a lot more beneficial than just throwing all your pieces away and then losing the game pretty easy. So we're going to take a look at another example of how perpetual check works in the endgame. In our next examples, we can see white has a huge advantage. Again, up an entire rook. But if it's black's move, take a minute and see if you can find the perpetual check. And it's not that hard, but hopefully you came up with queen to b4. And the king is going to have to move 1 of 2 places. He's going to move, well, 3 places, a2, a1, or c1. But either way, the queen can have perpetual check. If he moves to a1, we can come to a4. If he comes back to b1, we can come to b4. If he ever tries to come to c1, then we can bring our queen to a3. He can't get out of these checks. We can continue to check him all day long, and there's no way that he can get out of this. So this is a simple way where if we have a queen, we should always be looking especially for perpetual check if we're down a lot of material, where a lot of players will try some fancy exchange and end up losing the game pretty easily. The next thing I want to talk about is stalemate. And stalemate, as we're going to see, can be one of the most effective ways to tie a game in the endgame. Stalemate is a position where the king cannot move, but he's not in check, and this is a drawn game. And a lot of people don't win their games because they allow their opponent's king to be in stalemate. And there's a lot of people who are looking to stalemate your own king. In this position here, this is a famous game where it's black's move, and black thought it'd be wise to push his pawn up the board. He saw that if pawn to b2 and the rook captured on b2, then the rook could come to h2, and after the king moved, he could take this rook on b2 and have an easy endgame. But what black did not see is that after he came down to h2, the king could come to f3, and after the rook captures on b2, this is a drawn game. This is stalemate. The king cannot move anywhere, but at the same time, he's not in check. So this is a drawn game. So black had a decisive game winning, but he ended up drawing the game because of stalemate. So there's a lot of times in chess where you should look to stalemate your own king so that you can draw and not lose a game. One of the things that you want to look for especially is in the king and pawn endgame, and we'll go ahead and take a look at that real quick. In the king and pawn endgame, it's very important to know when a stalemate can occur and when one cannot occur. In the position, if the pawn is on the F file or the H file, or if it's on the bishop file or the rook file, however you want to look at it, it happens on both sides, the A and the C, or the F and the H. If it's on the F file or if it's on the H file, then this is going to be a drawn game. If the king can get to F8 or if the black king can get to H8, these are going to be drawn games. There's nothing white can do except to stalemate the black king. So these are a few things that you want to look at if you're in an endgame and you can see that yes, you're down a pawn and your opponent may think he can promote his pawn to a queen. If his pawn is on the F file or the H file, or on the other side on the A or the C file, and you can get your king to the 8th rank, then it's going to be a stalemate game. There's nothing your opponent can do to win the game. So these are a few things. 1, perpetual check, and 2, stalemating yourself if you need to, if you're down a material. If that's the only way to draw a game, it's much better than losing. So these are 2 things you could always think about in an endgame. Hopefully you guys enjoyed our 3rd installment of the endgame lessons. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next video.